Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ReGen regular meeting of the Finance Committee. It's February 4th. It's 9:01, so I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Delgado?
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwelder?
Here.
Chair Shirley?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, great. Next is the election of the committee chair and vice chair. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to serve in whatever capacity is helpful.
All right. How about chair?
Yeah, I think Jerry would be a good chair.
I don't want to be a chair.
You don't want to be chair?
I was a chair before.
Yeah. How about vice chair?
Whatever happened, I am vice chair.
Would you like to continue that role?
I would. I love being vice chair.
Excellent. Okay.
It's like you have the stigma of being a vice chair, but you have no authority. I like that.
Taking a hit for the team.
Way to put yourself out there, Jerry.
Yeah,
All right.
I would be happy to serve as chair. to
Okay.
Slightly reduce Kim's stress.
Oh, that's really nice. of you.
This is a stress
Okay.
committee meeting.
All right.
I don't know how we can get through it with the
She'll
stress.
no longer be having nightmares of dollar signs, minus signs, plus signs.
Okay. So I guess can I make the motion? All right. So I'll move that Bruce becomes our chair and Jerry becomes our vice chair.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. You want to take it over?
Next time. Okay, yes.
Like,
See, I don't have a printed
I
agenda.
look out for me. Okay.
All right, so thank you for your confidence in me. I will work hard and do the best I can as chair for this committee. I'll always respond to Ida's emails promptly.
That's important.
So we'll go to public communications, any public online? And don't see anyone here, but just to make sure any public wishing to comment, now is your time to do so. Seeing no one rise, we'll go to our action items. Starting with amending our purchasing policy. And who'd like to frame this for us?
I would like to frame it for you. The district purchases include supplies, equipment, general services, personnel services, public works and construction. In September of 22, the board last adopted these revisions purchasing policy. The existing purchasing policy provides the board must approve all purchases that exceed 75,000 except in certain circumstances. Generally requires the procurement and supplies of equipment at the lowest responsive bidder or proposer, except under certain conditions. The existing purchasing policy addresses expectations around ethics in purchasing. ReGen staff and legal have taken this on their backs with really redrafting a policy that shows a little bit more transparency. It does give us a clear direction of what is needed for a micro, a macro, and a large purchase of any of these items that were addressed there. I think the policy is going to bring us more information and more visibility around our expenses on these types of purchases, and it'll eliminate redundancies that we see coming to the board. We will see in our March board meeting a purchase for a 103,000 C&D belt for one of the lines. That is another example of an item that maybe doesn't need to come to the board. So if you had an opportunity to see the revisions in the new draft, you can see the improvement in the policy, also the improvement in the ability for staff to navigate through needed items that are needed for the everyday operation. I think we will continue to evaluate the purchasing policy and make any recommendations to it as we see needed to continue to be more efficient in our process of purchasing. Also, which would follow this item shortly would be probably a procurement software as well to dovetail with the policy and really have optics around our expenses around capital items, construction items that Director Ramirez deals with may have several components to an expense, and the ability to track and have it housed in one area. We'll start with the new purchasing policy that we can all agree on. There is an expanded from 75,000 to 200,000 that's noted. We did evaluate all the 24-25 year expenses to really give us a gauge of what that number was. So we looked at the number of instances that came to board, number of instances that were under, and we really wanted to have a balance where about 20 to 25% of those items are large items. Those are the items that we want to have optics for the board to see, and the remainder being in the realm of running operations. We believe that the purchasing policy is ready in its draft form, but we'll be happy to receive comments. And before we take any comments, I'd like to see if there's anything Deborah would like to add, because she was definitely the contributing author to the policy itself.
Thanks, Felipe. I think just a couple of guiding principles for the purchasing policy that we were trying to keep in mind as we thought about amendments and additions to the policy. Thinking about the purpose of a purchasing policy is to ensure that the public agency is getting the services or goods that it needs in a timely manner and efficiently and at a good value. Also making sure that the private sector has a sort of an equal or fair opportunity to seek to provide services and goods to an agency. So that was one sort of thing that we were looking at, thinking about balancing. While the board, of course, has all authority rests with the board, but you can choose to delegate some of that authority to staff, right? And so we're trying to think about what's the proper balance of delegation to principally the GM for purchasing versus what the board holds, right? So thinking about that and the efficiencies for the board, but also for staff in doing the sort of day-to-day business of the agency and running the agency. So trying to think about where those are. I think what you'll see is, to the extent that there are delegations under the policy, we tried to balance that with having some statement of expectations for those delegations, like purchases in writing, and you must, we expect you to seek 3 bids or proposals, and, providing some of that structure and guardrails so that even when the board has delegated authority, there are some expectations that are stated and not just sort of understood or assumed. And then just filling a couple of gaps where it's staff said, I think this is what the board expects of us, but we're not totally sure. So we tried to write some of that down in here to give comfort, frankly, to staff that they are operating within the board's expectations.
Okay. Let's go to public comment to make sure that we get that, if there is any. Seeing none in person, anything online?
No, I show none online.
Okay, so we'll close public comment. Any comments from board members? Input?
I just had a couple questions. So on I guess it's page 9 of the document, under procurement process, we talk about an informal bid, and I'm just wondering if you can kind of define what an informal bid is, because it talks about, I understand the must follow formal procurement procedures in terms of purchases above 200,000, and then sort of the middle range is it should be based on at least 3 informal bids or quotes where possible, and then the last one is may be based on 1 informal bid or quote. So I think just to begin, like if we can kind of define what an informal bid is.
Yeah. And I think the best way to understand it is in contrast to a formal bid, right? Okay. So a formal bid is putting out an RFP, a request for proposals, or a request for qualifications, or an invitation for bid. That's a formal document that's usually published on the agency's website. It might be published in the newspaper. It says the agency is seeking such and such good or service. These are the qualifications or criteria by which we're going to evaluate proposals. Proposals are due on such and such date. Submit them here. It usually involves a written evaluation component. It might also involve an interview or an oral evaluation component. Usually there's scoring criteria that are set out ahead of time. Qualifications are worth 20 points, price is worth 10 points, experience is worth 30 points, whatever. Those they're ranked, and then the highest ranked bidder is notified, and then depending on the price, comes to the board or to the GM for approval. That's your typical formal public agency procurement process. By contrast, an informal process could mean staff says we need to replace X widget, the conveyor belt apron. I'm not even sure those are the right words, but a piece of equipment. We know what spec it is. We know what we need. We're going to call 3 suppliers and ask them for their pricing. Right. So we're not publishing it in the newspaper. We're not publishing it on the website. We're not sending out like everybody who wants to has an opportunity to provide a price by this date. Instead, we're using some amount of discretion and judgment that these are probably 3 good suppliers who have the right quals, have the right piece of equipment, whatever it is, and can give us a price. So that's an informal process.
Okay, so I guess the way to think about it is it's us seeking, like doing the work to seek price bids for certain things versus putting something out there and having people come to us with their bids.
That is a way to think about the distinction there.
Yeah.
And a formal process, it takes longer, right? Because you have to you publish things and you set out timeframes. So formal processes typically can take 60 days to a year, depending on what the item is.
Right.
But for more time intensive, certainly more labor intensive for staff, because you have to put together all of those pieces and follow those structures. And so we use the dollar threshold typically for public agencies as sort of a guide for where we think that formal process should live, and then not.
So in that paragraph, the must follow the should and the may sort of reached out to me.
Yeah.
And then I compared that with the table at the end. Because I feel like the should feels a little loose.
Yep.
And the may is also loose, maybe intentionally, but yet in the table it talks about we need it like at least. At least it seems a little bit more formal or like there's more oomph behind the language in the table.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we need to match those.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. And I think there was some intentionality about it, but it might not be the right decision ultimately, right? So the intentionality behind it is if you are above the dollar threshold that's specified, the large purchase threshold, there really isn't any discretion. You have to do a formal process.
Right.
Unless, and we talk about it in here, it's an emergency or only one supplier can do it. There are a few. Okay.
I see.
But there really isn't any discretion. You
Yeah.
really need to do the formal process. For the medium-sized purchasing and the, I think it's the should, right? Purchases between 12 and 200 should be based on at least 3 informal bids or quotes, and then the where possible. So maybe it's either a shall be based where possible or should be based. But the idea is that there are times when there really only is 1 or 2 vendors that can provide this service.
Right.
So if you said shall and you can't actually get to 3, then we're stuck.
Right.
What do we do?
I see.
Right.
Okay.
So that was the idea behind it, but I think we could clean that up to make that even more prescriptive.
Yeah. I think I would feel better about that.
So I'm what I'm hearing is this saying exactly that, right? When we run into the conundrum of 2 or 3, that it says we can make that decision at that level because there is no other options there. I think just saying what the intent is rather than assumption of what it's saying.
Right.
Shall where possible.
Yeah.
Fits everybody's need.
Yeah, so that staff could, we know that the expectation is to seek 3.
Right.
If there really only is 2 out there,
Yes.
then we can still move forward.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think we're trying to cover a broad range of different scenarios. And like Deborah is saying, sometimes we'll send out request to people, and then we only get one response. And that, and then, you know, we handcuff.
So you
we-
attempted.
We
right?
attempt, and we attempt very often, and then
Yeah.
sometimes, some bidders won't even respond because they don't get the job, you know, and then we're out there, like, we have electrical work. And we send it out, and they're like, well, we never get that work anyway. So like the pool kind of reduces after a certain amount of time. We still send out the requests,
Right.
but the job can get bid out by somebody else. Or somebody has like very specific knowledge about ReGen. We have a power plant, we have our own network of electrical stuff that is not unique in electrical, but like they have some prior knowledge that would enable them to be able to address our need sooner and with more experience of the site. That you know, that's really the one we really want to go for, because if we bring somebody new in, they're gonna have to relearn the whole system, and we're gonna have to go through the process of educating them just for one, you know, some what we would consider a smaller scope of work for this site. So having that broad ability to right size the procurement for the work is kind of what we need, because there's not a whole lot of people in this area who work on power plants, you know.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to do both the smaller stuff and the more complicated stuff at the same time in that bracket. So
That makes total sense. So maybe it's the table that needs editing, because when you say at least 3 informal bids and you know that like there's no way you're gonna get at least 3, you know that there's only 2 people who are capable.
yeah,
Yes.
and we will give in our justifications to Felipe, we give a justification of like, he's expecting to see 3.
Right.
And if he doesn't see 3, we give a justification as to why we did not acquire 3.
Okay.
We sent out to 5 and only 1 responded. We
Right.
sent
It
out to
does say
5.
where possible.
Yeah, that's why we
Right. Yeah. Oh, where
put that-
possible. Yeah.
put that
Okay.
verbiage in there.
Yeah.
Because it is
Yeah.
a effort we make. It's not always achievable, as Deborah is pointing out.
Right,
And
right.
so we have to, as the people doing the work, you know,
Designated person.
yeah,
who's-
we need to give that background to Felipe so that he can say, yeah, that makes sense, and he's gonna authorize it.
Okay. Okay.
I would also add that sometimes there are service providers that have a very specialized type of work, some service that they can perform that may be slightly different than what other people in that same field perform. And so some of those people don't even go through the formal bidding process. Like they just won't, you know, they're so on demand that they won't even go through that type of a process. And so sometimes the most specialized person that you would want to perform said job is, you know, not attainable through like a formal process. So in those type of cases, it might be nice to provide comparator quotes that are similar, but then also say, there's a reason why this particular person, you know, might be selected, even if their rates are slightly higher. If they're in a range, a comparable range, it's still nice to get those quotes, but there might be a rationale as to why one might be selected over another, even though the comparator's been done.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like, okay, so the table's fine because it says where possible. So it's just maybe, I think, adding a little more clarification.
Yeah, and so again, you're on page 9 in section B. So I think
Right.
at the second to last line, it'll say shall be based on at least 3 informal bids or quotes where possible. And then even the next one, purchases below 12,000 shall be based on at least 1 informal bid or quote. Does that sort of clean up the language? to
Yeah, I
make
think
it-
so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the only other paragraph is on page 12 under protests. I just have just a couple of grammatical. So on let's see, on the 4th line, towards the end where it says, so long as timely, I think it should say, so long as timely request is made. in accordance with the procedures, the general manager prescribes the procedures and, sorry. Board of Directors so long as a timely request is made. That's what that should say. And then the fourth line from the bottom, that A needs to, it says including a filing a challenge.
Oh,
Just delete that A.
yeah, thank you.
And then my last comment is just like, thank you so much. When you looked at what our first purchasing policy was, and then this one, it's amazing the amount of detail and work and you know, so I appreciate that level of detail. And I'm also really happy to see the environmental point of view too. So in terms of recycled content for paper products, that I was happy to see that. So thanks for all the work.
Jerry?
You know, the way I look at things like this is it's a tool. You know, we have an objective. We want to accomplish certain things here. And once we understand that, then we want to make sure that this is a tool that we can use so that we can be as efficient as we possibly can. So other than that, I think, for instance, we had, I think it was pretty close to a COVID period. We were looking at some cats available to purchase. And then out of the blue, one popped up somewhere that we had to act on immediately. Remember that?
Yeah.
Was that a cat? I can't remember. And so, I mean, we were so excited about that just materialized.
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to have that flexibility and be able to have documents and stuff like that so that we have that. Kind of like the president has the executive, just, you know, he can write something. So just being able to, you know, make sure that we're as efficient as we possibly can. And then when new things come up, you know, like to make our ethane even more pure and stuff like that, like out of the blue something comes up, we want to be able to, yeah, let's do that. We need to do that. So we just articulate what our vision is, and then, you know, we want to get it done as best we can.
Yeah.
Because everything is kind of in flux when you're doing stuff.
Yeah, and I certainly, as we were drafting it, I said over and over again, we're not expecting this to make everybody's life harder, right? We're not like trying to develop procedure for procedure's sake.
Exactly.
And so I think a lot of what's reflected here, the team was already doing, frankly.
Exactly.
You know, it's just sort of putting it down on paper, making sure it meets the board's expectations, and so that staff can say, yeah, we're not just sort of, you know, assuming we're, you know, but I take your point that we're
Right.
not trying to make people's lives crazy just to, you know,
And we're not going to
paper.
get like sued or something if we have a shall instead of a should or something, right? I don't know.
And I think, you know, Director Ramirez contributed a lot of the headaches that he had with the cast and having to redo and not have 25 people lined up to develop it for us or to build it for us. And so he applied a lot of the nuances. So I don't think it's going to create a headache for him. It's going to relieve a headache because some of the things that he was tasked to do were, well, what do I do? The policy doesn't really say this is what I should do. We now look at this policy as a guiding principle to purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
We can point at it and say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is where we have staff has its ability to do. Board has its optics around it. So this will now be our guiding principle. So if we learn any more as we start implementing this will be another, we now have to implement it. We probably have to make sure that we have software that can drive it and give us the results that is intended from the policy. So step one of a few more steps that we're looking for as an organization to bring better visibility around big projects and how do we spend our money, and something that we can point at to give reassurance not only to the board but to the community that pays the gate rate and the fees that we're spending the money the way we should be. So we appreciate all the feedback, and this will go to the board in February in draft form. We'll seek more feedback. We don't get much feedback, then we can adopt the languages that were imposed today. But if we get more feedback, there's no hurry. We'll round the corner and we'll bring it back in the following month and implement those changes and try to change them.
I had some input, we didn't need to create this wheel. So I'm wondering, did staff compare other waste agency procurement policies to maybe make ours sort of benefit from something that they had that was?
Yeah, I'd say we did maybe 4 types of due diligence. One is we looked at all of the member agency codes and policies. So your city codes and things to say, okay, what is it? What's the lay of the land and what scopes and substances there? We looked at the actual procurements that ReGen has done over a period of time to see what types, what volume, price volumes, where are we, right? To get a sense of what's the day-to-day business of the agency. I'm a purchasing nerd for public agencies, so I have sources that I brought in from other clients and other work that I do for public agencies in thinking about sort of what I see as some standard practices of public agencies. And then we talked a lot about what does the team need? Like, where are they running into? I'm not sure if this is right, or this seems kind of wonky or whatever. So we had like internal conversation about what the need was.
Great. I would guess it would help us during auditing that they see that this policy has got more meat on the bones, make them feel better about evaluating us. A couple of things I thought I noticed in the proposed policy was there was an absence of transparency in requiring the general manager via a consent calendar coming to the board to let us know when she or he has used this new discretion. And it might have already been in there at 75K, now we're bumping up 200K. So I could have missed it. Is there somewhere in the policy that says, because I don't even care if it's $1 million or $2 million, as long as the board is apprised of when the discretion is used. So we can always retroactively sort of approve or become aware of something that was an emergency for efficiency's sake, or for whatever reason the discretion was used up to 200,000, just to have a little ledger so that it might only happen like 4 times a year or 5 times a year or whatever. So it'd be nice to know when it does happen, so there's complete transparency, so that no purchase is made without budgetary approval or former board approval that doesn't retroactively at least come to the board. And I wouldn't think it would be hard to have a short list every board meeting, one item this board meeting, 0 items, 3 items, 0 items, 0 items, 0 items, just so that on the consent we can say, oh, well, look at that, he decided he needed 195K for a new belt, and it broke and whatever, they needed to be replaced. Yeah, I think that's a way for us to keep on track, keep on top of this policy, so we're aware of how it's working out, rather than it being used a lot or a little and we don't have a clue if it's a lot or a little. So for transparency sake, is it already in there, and would it be a big deal to put it in?
So there is one sentence in here that gets at that page 8 of the packet. The general manager shall provide to the board on a periodic basis, typically monthly, a report on cash activity.
Right, I saw that.
So, but maybe that's not quite what you're looking at.
That's really good,
Yeah.
and it addresses a whole different thing when you're using cash. This addresses could be check or wherever you make the procurement, but it could be $175,000. It wouldn't fit under that because it's not cash, but it's the same sort of issue. Maybe go in the same section.
I mean, I'll ask Deborah the question. Would we want that to live in consent? I mean, that belt purchase is one of them, right?
Yeah.
If the current policy was in place, I would purchase the $103,000 belt, but then it could show up on consent, or do we just put it as part of the finance packet of these are the expenses that were incurred, belt expense, loader tires, a diesel delivery drop that was, maybe at that limit, 175,000. I think those are good. Up to what point do you guys want to see that visibility? Is it that 100,000 to 200,000 range? Is it every expense? Because I'm sure you wouldn't want to see those $1,000 expenses, $2,000 expenses. But we should have a range of, when I exceed the 100,000, those will be annotated in the finance budget. And we could just, go ahead. I think this is good for discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. We can discuss amongst us of what might satisfy what you're talking about. I think as we're developing this is one of the first steps in developing more robust stuff. Like what we could do as another idea is contracts, a ledger of contracts that were signed that month. Felipe signed four contracts this month. It's just, the amount, the vendor, and then that comes out every month. That may be a possible way to address it. So that way, because on the cash side, you may be multiple months where you don't see the amount, where it's like 25% was paid each month, and you'd have to do the mental math to connect all those dots over the months. But getting knowledge of the contract was like $100,000 contract that was signed, just to get awareness.
Street sweeping,
I think
uniforms, things of that nature. They're reoccurring expenses that will go into an exceedance, but you put in the ledger one time and say, the annum expense is going to be X, I think.
And then you will see the cash spends over time that go to that contract. I think internally we can talk about ideas like that, both on the cash side and on the contract side. And we'll take your comment and work with what we can develop.
Okay, so I'm confused. Past practice, if you sign a $150,000 contract, or you want to, doesn't it go on our agenda before? So the board approve, okay, yeah, we approve $103,000. So that contract's been approved by the board. I don't think we need to see it when it's signed.
No.
I think we only need to see those contracts that didn't come through us.
Yeah, and this in this new procurement world, the $200,000 would be the new threshold, the new level.
So over 200,000, we'd see it once when we got approved at the board level. We wouldn't see it when it was.
If it was below $200,000, which is what I understand you saying you want awareness of. So if Felipe signs something in the prior month that's lower than 200,000 but above 10,000, some reasonable amount, then that just goes on a ledger every month of this. These were the contracts that were signed the last month that are below.
All right. So I was unaware that this policy we're being considered today is so that I didn't know that every contract under 200,000 would not come to the board. I thought it was those contracts under 200,000 that couldn't come to the board because of efficiency reasons.
Yeah,
that he had the new delegation of passing those through without the board knowing. So does this policy mean that any contract under 200,000, we the board won't see?
That's what it is.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
I think
Alright.
there are purchases that are contracted purchases, and then there are also purchases that are smaller that maybe they may not have like a formal contract, but go to Felipe. It's like a work order, great. But in the project total would be under $200,000, but it might be, $35,000 here, $40,000 here, that sort of a thing when you're building the whole scope of the project. So I think as staff, we should figure out how we could capture all of those purchases under 200K and present them. But back to Felipe's point, it might be nice for us to know what's the minimum number where the board is saying, maybe we just don't need to see purchases that are under this number. So we're not bogging you down with these long lists of purchases that.
Oh, I mean, we never saw anything that was below 75,000 before, right? Because that was your limit. So maybe it's just anything over between 75,000 and 200,000.
As starters to see if it's too clumsy to do that because there's so many.
Yeah, we'll talk about it and kind of put brackets on what we think the amounts are, and we'd have to develop a new monthly task, but we'll see what we can come up with.
What's the general manager's ability to do something de novo? How much can he spend de novo that we didn't know about? It seems a little bit slightly different than what we're talking about today. So if something unexpected came up and he needed to spend 220,000, what's his, like in Marine, it's like the city manager can approve anything under 25 grand or something like that. What's the current discretion of the general manager?
Under this current policy, it just says broadly, all purchases under 75. And then may be approved by the general
Okay,
manager.
so what if we approve 200K and he has a $230,000 reason to spend money in a hurry?
Yeah,
What does he do?
there's a classification in the procurement policy for an emergency purchase
Mhm.
in which that there's specific things that need to be followed during that process, and there needs to be a need. Like for instance, the belt that we're talking about, praise, it snaps in half, and
Right,
the
so
burp is down.
that's what he's got to do, or
It's a
she does what
business
she gotta do.
need, yeah, to keep service going, and it's for the public.
Right, so then does that come back to
Good.
the board retroactively? Like she did this because she had to.
That's been the past practice.
Okay, that's what I was
something that's
talking
going
about.
over.
I was confused what this was all about. So if he goes over the new amount, 200,000, then retroactively the board will be apprised.
Yeah, and these are the clarity things where now that it'll be in policy, there'll be less judgment calls, because the general manager at times is like, well, I've got to call the chair, I've got to, what do they think? Should we do this? Should we do that? And that kind of leaves us in a judgment call area, that if we can say, okay, we're just going to follow the emergency procurement column and go through those steps, the board knows what they're going to be receiving. The general manager knows what hurdles need to be overcome to be able to do that kind of business decision. I think, at least I'm grateful to Felipe and Deborah, because there are times in the past where we have had to make judgment calls, and we know what past practice is. With the old general manager, with the old board, et cetera, that were performed. And this just helps everybody be clear on what we're doing and make sure we're hitting against those bumpers as we move along. And it's just gonna make us, as Deborah said, more efficient and help us make better decisions that are in line with what the board wants.
So as a board member, I like to know when expenses are made that weren't part of the budget, like, oops, we should have done this during the budget, but we got to do it. And so it's good to come to the board with those. And again, the dollar amount, I haven't thought about, surely not, a new copy machine, but
Yeah.
Anyway. And then the other one is when the general manager needed to go above his authority because of an emergency or efficiency or an opportunity, that you couldn't wait for the next board meeting. Just retroactively, I like to know when those two things happen so that we can kind of test how our policies are working and then have that transparency that we find out and we can take a second look at it.
Yeah, and that sounds fair, to know what's going on, even if it happened in the past month. It makes a lot of sense.
To the first point about the budget, so the policy says all appropriations, all purchases have to be consistent with funds that are available and designated for that purpose.
So when they're not, that's when I like to know.
Yeah. Well, and this suggests that they really shouldn't happen, except maybe in an emergency, right?
Yeah, or you get a cat that's a really good price, but it's not gonna be on the market after the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Just no retroactively.
Our past experience has been to notify. So we had a Yenenbacher engine at one time failed early in the month, right after this meeting. We had a long gap. I think I made a phone call to Chair Shirley, said we could sit on our hands and continue to lose money, or we make this purchase and we be in the ballpark, we bring it back to the board and we get authorized for that purchase. I think legal's interpretation was if the board decides not to, we make a hard phone call and we pay the penalty for sending it back, right? But the need presented itself so strong that we made the purchase. The board realized the need of the engine and the approval went through. So those will continue to be fostered in that way. I'm not sure if there's any more we need to do in the language to do that, but I think the language is doing what it's intended to. Again, this will be a policy that should be optically visible. If we ever have any concerns that it's not there, then we bring it back and we say, we have a concern based on the actions that were there. But this is the first entry into that realm of assurance that there's a practice in place that is desirable of the board, the public, and staff that make us more efficient in the process. I appreciate all the great questions.
All right, my next is smaller issue, and it's more Zoe's realm. She knows more about this than I do. But the last time I looked many years ago, the thing about recycling was important to clarify post-consumer recycling products that you want to buy. This is a post-consumer, 20% post-consumer, rather than just this is a recycled product. So like, you know, the mill shavings are recycled if you put them into paper, but if you put used paper into new paper, that's post-consumer, that's even better. And I'm wondering, I looked through the policy and I didn't see any reference to post-consumer. I just saw reference to recycled products.
Recycle products.
Yeah, so and this is in section 8, and we added this to make sure that we were responsive to 1383 and our obligations for certain purchasing requirements.
Yes.
So this is the minimum requirement, and then I think it's a policy decision whether to elevate the minimum requirement.
Okay, so the minimum now is recycled, and I think the language there is if it's cost prohibitive, you don't have to get recycled. And so if the minimum instead was something higher bar, like post-consumer, you try to get post-consumer. But if it's cost prohibitive, you get recycled. If it's cost prohibitive, you get non-recycled. But if the post-consumer is still a higher bar, better for the environment, you know, who else but us would be able to do that? You know, we're like the shining example of someone you'd expect to do it if it was reasonable. But I don't know if it's still a big deal. It just was many years ago when I looked into it.
Yeah, I have the same background knowledge as you do on this topic, and maybe that's an area where we could write, you know, when possible or where possible, something like that language that would make sure that we're meeting the minimum state requirement, but also signifying that, you know, when it's not cost prohibitive, that would be a good goal for us to achieve.
Okay.
I do think there's something to be said about being more restrictive. That's adding another level of restriction on what organization can do. And so I think it doesn't prohibit us from doing post-consumer content paper. This just sets the lowest bar of what we're required to do. So I think that's for consideration too. It's not like this means we have to get recycled. We can still go post-consumer if that is within the reasonable cost.
Yeah, but if you don't write it down, any turnover in staff, they may not even look for post-consumer. It won't even pass their mind. They'll just go for recycle.
True.
So if it's available on the market, if it's commonplace, if it's better, but you don't have to do it if it's cost prohibitive, it might as well be your first resort, recycled your second, and non-recycled your third resort.
Let us look into it, and then we'll make a recommendation whether it should go in or it should stay out based on relevance of the need.
Yeah. Okay. And then I don't know how germane this is to the policy before us on the agenda today, but I would like to better understand how the delegation works from the general manager to department directors. You know, if Zoe wants to spend $5,000 on something, or 25,000 grand or 100 grand, what's her delegation, and David yours, and how does that work?
Yeah, so the policy is written to say that the delegation comes from the board to the GM and then recognizes that the GM has authority to write rules and procedures for their staff and how they want to implement that with staff. And it also recognizes that the GM could delegate some purchasing authority to staff as they deem appropriate. So it doesn't get into the details of the GM's work there. And when we were talking about that, because, you know, people certainly ask, well, how, you know, what is that going to look like? We said, let's start with the policy, make sure that we've got the boards, we're going the right direction with the board. And then Felipe can work on, you know, the details that flow from that, from him to staff.
I think the challenge is there's parity in every role. Like David's expenses will be in the millions and millions of dollars, right? And so I think that's what we need to analyze after policy's been.
When I worked for the government, now I'm retired, it was so nice to be able to just spend at will with the trust, you know, up to a certain amount. It was like 2,500 in some circumstances and 10,000 in others. But then at the end of the month, you'd have to give your credit card statement to your boss. And if you did anything stupid, you know, there'd be, there's a review. So we never did anything stupid, but we didn't have to go and get the approval every time we wanted to buy something. It was so nice to feel that trust and empowerment. So I was just curious how it worked currently here.
We do the same thing. I get from finance, stack this big, usually it goes to the finance director. It has all the purchases that are being done on credit cards so we can review it. We sign, we authorize that, we evaluate it. So we do that every month.
That's really nice.
We also currently have a purchase order system whereby purchases over $500 go to our supervisors for approval. So there is a mechanism within that currently, and I think what I'm hearing Felipe say is that we can look at that after this policy is completed to see if there's any revisions needed.
And that's,
I don't feel particularly handcuffed through this process as a staff member.
and there is a practice of what you're talking about. If they need to do tires on a pickup truck, the equipment manager is going ahead and making that purchase, not having to go through the general manager. The stuff we're all talking about is like writing that down and then making sure that, everybody knows their bounds to be able to execute what they need. And it may follow just these same thresholds. It's just like, as Deborah said, Felipe would come up with those numbers and what the authorizations are.
And that's in the future because it's after this, and we may never see that. Or would we see that new policy from general manager delegation?
Typically it would be in Felipe's realm. And so it wouldn't be a board approved item. That's for him. Generally, I'm saying for the city manager equivalent, right, to decide on how to implement the policy.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So, someone like to make a motion?
I will move that we recommend this purchasing policy with the minor edits that we talked about.
Second.
All right. And I assume that means a look into the post-consumer.
Yes, post-consumer, the minor edits under the protests. And then just the couple word change under the procurement process.
And thinking about any reporting on contracting
Right.
that happens at the June level. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any final comments before we go to a vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or no's? All right, that motion passes unanimously. We gotta move on to the agreement with Valley Recycling for new disposal.
All right, I will be talking through this item here. We were approached by Valley Recycling. They are a California-based, privately held, multi-generational, family-owned corporation, over 40 years of operating history in recycling, construction, and demolition. They have a facility in San Jose that does construction and demolition. We have an opportunity to enter. They had a desire to look at the Waste Connections agreement and see if they could get 5 years of capacity for the residual waste. I think there's benefits in the residual waste. It's construction and demolition material, so it is already been harvested. It's inert. That material could be used for multiple purposes here at the facility. They were founded in 1986. They've been privately owned. They're a certified minority business enterprise. They service the greater Bay Area, Northern California, Monterey County, Salinas Valley, and they are open to the public. They currently provide C&D waste processing services at their transfer station in San Jose. They produce ADC, and they provide other ancillary services as part of their core services. Their request is to deliver 100,000 tons of inert material that wouldn't be so onerous and probably wouldn't come with much issues for us. It's about 10 to 12 trucks daily that would be delivered to hit the 100,000 annual mark. If we just evaluated the Waste Connections agreement, we could run simple math on $100,000. Waste Connections will be going to $41 a ton, which is just above half of the existing half of the gate rate. I'd like the opportunity to negotiate a term with Valley Waste, no less than the existing waste connections agreement. If we could get more, that'd be great. The revenue value of this would be $4.1 million a year. Over 5 years would be 20.5 million. Again, 10 to 12 trucks a day. We believe that we can imply the 20.5 million. We don't want to ear tag it anywhere, but we do have bond liability. We have our CalPERS liability. And then, as you heard at the last meeting, we do have a desire to entertain master planning for the facility of on-ramping and off-ramping. A major focus of the master plan would be development module 8 and 9. Really what we're trying to do is build the infrastructure in advance so that we have landfillable. Right now, we look at landfill space. We got 100 years of landfill space. All of that is not developed yet. So we do not have 100 years of landfill space. We have the landfill space that's available, that's been identified by Director Ramirez, which is the module 7. And then we can push trash up here. We think it's 5 to 7 years of infrastructure landfillable area. We want to better expand that. And then also the goal of 2036, pay down our debt, build the infrastructure, prepare us for off-ramping of external volume. But we could use these dollars intentfully for the objectives to approach 2036 and leave us in position to render a decision whether we want to continue to take external volume, whether we want to not, and just expand landfill life. But I think it would be favorable for us to get to the infrastructure that's desired to attain 100 years of landfill life. And this would be a really nice opportunity for us to enter into an agreement relevant to revenue dollars that's needed to finish some of the projects and hopefully present an opportunity not to get into our undesignated cash as frequent as we have projected in the last budget year. So this is another opportunity for us to realize an opportunity for revenue to build longer term infrastructure that will prepare us for landfilling at any given time without having to rush into a landfill design because we're running out of space and landfill planning becomes a little bit more difficult to do. Expanding it gives us greater opportunity. I think I will hand it over to Director Ramirez if there's any impacts or concerns with the landfill space and any comments that he may have on the volume that could potentially come to ReGen.
Yeah, this particular material that Felipe is talking about is actually a pretty dense material because it comes in, it's already been chipped. It's very compact. It's not like a regular waste, which is very fluffy and very voluminous in comparison. This has been chipped. It's construction and demolition debris. And so it's really compact. And I think for every 5 years, it would be, for every 5 years of this agreement, it would be probably 0.7 of a year worth of landfill capacity. So it's pretty small in its volume that it's going to take or landfill space that it's going to consume.
0.7 might be 70% or
0.7 of a year, like 70% of a year of capacity.
Sounds like a lot.
Of 1 year for 5 years of waste.
Oh, in 5 years, we would be
consume
using 70% of a 1 year space.
1 year space. Yeah. So depending on what agreement term that Felipe ends up negotiating, we can multiply that out. But it's not a big hit on landfill volume, and it's actually very dense material in that we're going to get more weight per volume out of it. So I have no real concerns. The material is construction and demolition debris, so it may have some drywall in it. We're already treating for hydrogen sulfide, H2S, as part of our landfill system. So I don't see any major impacts of this causing any problems whatsoever at the landfill.
And I was able to get with Jameson Pfister and the ops team relevance to equipment and people. At this time, we wouldn't need any additional manpower or people for this existing volume. So it will make us just more efficient in our usage of equipment and manpower. We're excited to do that. We'd like to bring this to the full board at the end of February to give legal counsel and the general manager's opportunity to go and negotiate a term, bring it back to the board for approval, and see if we could really disposition ourselves financially and build the infrastructure that we desire to go further out without coming into a wall. I think when we were building Module 7, it came very relevant to David, is we already need to start working on developing Module 8. Otherwise, we become very efficient in the way we're filling. I think for the last quarter year, we've been filling upwards, and operationally, operators want to fill where they're just pushing off into a hole rather than up against walls, mainly because we're challenged with the fluff liner and the protective layer that we want to protect the infrastructure. This material could be used for some of that in future developments as well. And it would come at a better rate than what we currently get material from the Zanker facility and ZBest facility of their overs, which is a ADC agreement that we have with Green Waste that expires in 2030. We get just short of $18 a ton. This would be an improvement by almost double what we get right now for that type of material. So this is an extremely rare opportunity for us. And I think some other ancillary work that could be performed is broaching City of Salinas that we're doing this. And when they have realization that we could, help South County landfill, Johnson Canyon landfill with their time, I think this is an opportunity that we will expire in 5 years, and we can always revisit with City of Salinas with opportunity as we approach that 2036 time. Is there a desire for them to landfill expand and they don't need us as a resource? It'd be good for us to identify that is the case, and I'd like to fact find our position with the City of Salinas a little bit more. And I think we have a great opportunity with their new CAO. Cesar Zuniga was elected into the position. He was the interim for a short amount of time. So I think we're very excited for Cesar and Team SVR. So we do have some items that are set for the future to start some collaboration again with Salinas Valley Recycles on a different front than 1383 and all the messaging that we're releasing. So we're doing great work now. But there is a lot of potential with this opportunity here in front of us. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, let's go to the public. No one here in person, anyone online?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll close public comment. Board input?
Why did they come to us?
Because they recognize the Waste Connections Agreement volume, and they are trying to go into a 24 operation, so they need outlets for their residual material. Otherwise, their compound facility will just be inundated with material. So they need outs for material out of the San Jose area.
And so where were they going before this?
They have been going to Kirby Canyon, which is a waste management landfill. They go to Billy Butler, which is over the hill into Los Baños area. And then they go into North Bay, which is San Francisco area as well. So they're a little bit of everywhere. They're just trying to be more diverse and have options for their business operations. They're trying to expand running a C&D facility 24 hours a day and not just 12 hours a day. So
Oh, I see. So they're expanding.
yeah, they have needs.
Okay.
Do you assume they have the same feelers out to those other places you mentioned?
Yeah,
So they're looking for price point.
yeah, they're looking for price point. And I think we stick to what we said. We want half of the gate rate, short term. Guardian Principles has navigated to us when there's a need or a potential ability to render a service for the organization that we could go there. Again, I put it out there that I believe this is a very good base scenario for our good organization to, again, prepare itself for 2036 and deciding how much more volume do we want to take externally and being prepared for that off-ramp.
You mentioned $41 a ton.
I would say I only referenced the Waste Connections Agreement.
Right.
Waste Connections is going to be going to $41 a ton in February. And they have a $2 increment every year of their 5-year agreement. They will expire in 2030. And they will be at $49 a ton, so $2 increment every year, which is more than a 5% increase on an annual basis.
So is that a similar contract that you would propose for?
I think
for
we,
Valley
I think we
Recycling?
would start like we did with Waste Connections. We would start on the high end and
Mhm.
work to relevance, right? I don't think I want to give up my cards in
Yeah.
this discussion here, but
Right.
I think we would start
right,
with
got it.
with our preference point, and then we
Mhm.
negotiate the terms. There is ancillary terms that I'd like to include in this one, that are not in the Waste Connections agreement that we can ask for. Some of those items would be capacity provisions. So knowing that if we ever get close to capacity, that we have a provision in there that I can call them and say, okay, I could only take 8 loads today, it's not 12. So being able to reduce the cap based on what we're seeing, and usually that would happen during the day if we have any large projects that are occurring that get us close to the tonnage limit. We either need to reduce the volume coming in, or we need to reach out to the LEA and say we're going over our permitted amount. I like a safety provision in there to just say, we need only 8 loads because we have X project going on in Pacific Grove or in Marina that is gonna require the space. So we would have the ability to kind of tone it down if we need to, based on our permit. Another provision is one that we don't do very often, but we could ask for a prepayment every month before the volume arrives, which is an advance payment before the service is used. So we don't have no issues with trying to collect. So I think these are provisions that would be emphasized for doing ease of business. So if it's ease of business out there, it should be ease of business in our administrative office. We're also looking at opportunities there.
Do you think about putting in a minimum requirement?
I would take that suggestion very gratefully. So I would say we would want a minimum, but also cap, right? We want to know what the max volume would be, and I would say it would benefit us to put a minimum, put her pay. You put her pay 80% or you pay the full amount.
All right, sounds good.
Jerry,
Sounds good.
is there a minimum max? What is the minimum max, if any, at the Waste Connection now?
I think their threshold was 77,000 tons a year. Just don't quote me on it. It is 77,000 tons max that they can put in. There is no minimum, I believe, in that agreement, but I will take your direction and we'll see if we can include a minimum in there. I think that would be a benefit for us because it would be no less than X.
Yeah.
We can say max up to, but if they only brought us 50,000 tons and there's no consequence, we may not be doing it as efficient as we want to be. So,
How much is Waste Connection bringing us now if they have a max of 77K?
8 loads a day, 8 trucks a day, roughly.
Okay, so that's about 75% of what we hope Valley Recycling would bring.
Yes.
All right. Is it public information how much those
Yes.
other
Yes.
competitors are charging? Like we're charging 41. What are the other ones charging that you mentioned?
So green waste is roughly around $31 a ton for MSW waste coming in.
And what facility do they?
He's talking about other facilities.
You
What are
mentioned-
they paying in other facilities?
The private companies, I do not
No,
know.
the landfills, the Kirby landfill.
Kirby is a private, so I would not know what
And
terms
Billy
they're
Butler.
under. Billy Butler, I believe, is public, so I could do public search on what their rate is for them. I do understand that Billy Butler has a threshold, a minimum threshold. I think 2 or 3 trucks are allowed a day by that current hauler there. So there is gonna be restrictions. Not all of them are public information, but the ones that are, we will research.
The pulse of the industry compared to when we started with Waste Connection, have the rates gone up or gone down? Is it more of a buyer or a seller market today compared to when we started with Waste Connection?
I would say it's starting to shift towards the seller, right? when I look at the historic agreements, it was definitely the buyer's market. We now have theory that I'm not sure if I want to give it away at a third. At a half is a great consideration because there's value for the outcomes of projects. So we as an organization are turning that buyer's market into a seller's market, but by preparation, we're doing rate increases, we're doing other things. We could turn away and walk away from it and still come out potentially okay. We don't know for sure. These are added elements to the revenue that will bring items to completion, whether it's the development of modules, whether it's pay down our liabilities. It will be a benefit, but we are shifting that market from a buyer's market to a seller's market. I did have meetings with some of those existing agreements that we have, and their position has been, we like the rate that we're paying today and no willingness to move. This will be a great example is, okay, no willingness to move, then we'll look for a different buyer. And this could start shaping up the future for us as we approach 2030 and 2036.
The reason I ask is because if the market today is better for landfills than it was when we made our agreement with Waste Connection, then maybe $41 shouldn't be the starting point. But you all know that better than I, 42, 43, whatever. If that was a starting point, do we just lose them because it's so far above their options? Or do they ask us, why or is it better? That's all.
Yeah, and I will take it into consideration. I don't believe it'll be our starting point. I just referenced the existing agreement that was most favorable for us.
You'll figure out the starting point.
Yes.
After doing more due diligence.
Also, transportation costs matter, right? So where the
They're
waste is coming from matters and makes different landfills more or less attractive.
And that's always the case, right? So to me, it's no small amount when you say 70% of 1 year. That's maybe 15% of 5 years. So if we're going to do a new 5-year contract.
So 5 years of 5 years of this waste would take 70% of a year's capacity. So
Right. So 70% of 1 year is about 15% of 5 years. Yeah. So if I were to say, hey, we can say yes or no to getting 15% of our garbage for the next 5 years from this one, I'd say, well, that's a significant amount. You don't have too many, you have, 6 or 7, 15% opportunities. So I don't think it's a small amount. And so that's why I'm glad we have the white paper, because the white paper is all about this, right? How do you decide what thoughts go into whether you use your landfill or save your landfill? To get more money, you use it. To save it, you get less money, and rates might have to go up. So I'd only suggest that maybe a link to the white paper be provided to all of the board members in case some of them maybe never seen it. Some of them, like me, haven't seen it since it was written. And it just gives you a little bit more reading material. Not that anyone might read it, but I mean, I hope to. But that's what the white paper was for, is to help us through these kinds of decisions.
So 5 years of them bringing material equals 8.4 months of landfill capacity taken from our 100 years span.
Yeah. Those are also good numbers.
And we'll include it in the landfill. Yeah, I just ran the math really quick. So 70% of 1 year is 8.5 months.
So it's 8.5 months or 8.4 months of landfill space. That's one metric, which is important.
Yeah.
And then it's X percent, maybe 15% of the next 5 years and 70% of 1 year. All these little metrics, one board member might latch onto one rather than.
We'll make some more consumable metrics. Yeah. We'll work on, we'll refine.
So I had, someone want to make a motion, or we don't need a motion? It's just a schedule.
Procedural point, I'm curious, are you looking for bringing this to the board the full board in February to then go and negotiate and come back to the board?
Yes, I will not negotiate anything until we bring it to the full board end of this month. Then we get time to negotiate, and if we can come to a term, we'll bring it to the March board meeting. So nothing will be signed, nothing will be dealt with. It'll all be conceptual bargaining to get to. I won't do nothing until we bring it to the full board, and the full board approves the position that we can start negotiations and then bring a term back to them for approval.
And always looking out for not compromising our negotiating position by having to telegraph to the person we're negotiating with what we're doing. So
Is this a closed session item then?
there really isn't a basis for a contract negotiation in closed session.
Okay.
So I'm just food for thought.
And we're practicing transparency. It's what we do, right? People can go and discover, you know, at the end of the day, if they're very interested in what we're doing here, they can discover anyway. So, you know, to Deborah's point, if there is no rule for us to be in closed session, I'm happy to talk that we're gonna negotiate similar, you know, attributes, but we won't see what that happens. But I'm not sure if there's any other way to do that from here to the board meeting. We'll see more exposure. Do we just limit what we're saying we want to do? And that's really to go out and bring back a negotiated term for the board to authorize and review, right?
Yeah.
So
I guess an alternative approach, food for thought, would be to not go to the board in February, take the feedback here,
and
try to
bring
complete a
something.
negotiation, and then bring a contract for the board's approval. Sort of depends on the sort of getting direction from the board on their appetite for this kind of a transaction, whether it's worth staff investing the time.
It would save staff a whole month's worth of time to wait.
Mm-hmm.
We could essentially set some meetings up and have discussions and bring all the reasons why we want to do this. And by the way, we have a draft agreement prepared and hear back at that time. And
Yeah.
we're not given all the terms in advance before we actually negotiate. So I think it'd be advantageous for us. I appreciate your.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, I feel like with the white paper, we've already made that assumption that we're in the position to entertain these sort of contracts anyways, because of the amount of landfill life that we have left. And that we have projects that we want to complete. Like, we've already stated all that. And so I feel like I can't imagine this coming to the board and the board saying like, whoa, hold on, you know, we're not gonna take outside waste when we've already had this discussion with the white paper. And so I think I would feel comfortable, you know, in that it would provide you know, staff with a better position for negotiation. I mean, I think my sense is that the board wants to make sure we're getting a good rate. And because I think that's been the issue in the past. And so if we want to make sure that you know, we're using our landfill wisely and that we're getting what we need to continue to be a landfill that, you know, that functions really well in the future. So
I'd also add that the guiding principles, which states when we should and shouldn't be considering outside waste, was adopted by the current board. And so that could be another reference document to get at what you're mentioning.
Right.
Was the purpose of the guiding principles.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I guess it was the guiding principles. It wasn't the white paper, but it
White
was the
paper
guiding.
informed the guiding principles.
Yeah,
Both documents are.
right. In my head, it's all meshed together. But right. I feel like we've had this discussion.
Yeah, I'm good with that. We can prepare the agenda item for when we're prepared with the negotiation piece. So it gives us a leg up on sharing where we would want to be at, and we can do that behind the scenes and then present our best option to the board, and the board can send us back, or the board can approve. And we don't have to accept at any given time until the board says, yeah, we're comfortable with it.
I'm feeling uneasy about a $20 million contract being pursued without the board knowing in advance. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can either use email to board members or another way. So besides using an email to board members, so that this could come to them without public discussion of rate details that would compromise our place in the negotiation process. It's a good opportunity, especially for new board members, to put together our guiding principles, our white paper, and here's an example of where we apply what's in those documents. What do you think, board? And I think, like Kim, in this regard, that they're gonna say yes. No one's gonna, maybe one or two, but the majority is gonna say yes if staff has good reasoning, which they do. And we can always use 20 million for various things. I think the answer is going to be yes. And so the question is the process that we use to get to a yes. And Kim is suggesting a more truncated process, and I'm suggesting a longer process. But I don't want to suggest a process that holds you up to get this done sooner than later. And I don't want to suggest a process that compromises sensitive rate discussion to a negotiating party. So I'm not sure, I'm not going to die on a sword for anything, but I don't feel easy with a $20 million contract going to the board when it's already cooked, because by the time you negotiated it, you're saying, do you want to approve this? Or do you want us to go back and tell this party that we wasted everyone's time? It's kind of late in the game to bring it to the board at that point.
Could I suggest maybe in the GM communications at the board meeting could be information provided to the board that this is a project that the GM is working on.
Should you wish to discuss any details, please contact me.
Yeah, and providing some of the contours about who the potential contracting party is and so forth.
And we suggest you look at the guiding principles and the white paper, which have been emailed to you or will be emailed to you.
Or
background.
Even more that staff will be guided by those board adopted materials.
So check them out. Check out those documents.
How many new directors have we gotten since we approved our white paper and guiding principles? How long we got? Like 3, I think, maybe even 4.
I think that they were a part of it though,
The
right?
guiding principles was this board.
Okay.
This board, and maybe with the exception of yourself being absent. But I think the white paper, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure if they were here during that process for the full white paper. And that was a long process, so they may have been here towards the end of it, but not through the entirety of the process.
Because that's kind of the point, is if you have that, then that's our philosophical position. And so if we're, doing that, we're being consistent with what we've already agreed on. But notifying people by email, or, there's nothing wrong with that too. If somebody thinks it's crazy.
Right, so I think Deborah suggested a kind of compromise between the positions. And if we can get them the white paper and the guiding principles, whether they look at it or not, we're being as transparent as we can be and protecting our proprietary information at the same time.
Yeah, we have a great opportunity, but we want to forward you these documents so that you understand how we look at things. Yeah.
Okay.
So
In addition to the GM comments, there's also, this committee does report out to the board as well. And the agenda is, and notes are transmitted to the board, and that may be another opportunity to consider.
Or you could at least state that you brought this to the finance committee.
well,
in
I like all the
GM comments.
suggestions. I'll look at Deborah as what I should and shouldn't be doing. I really like the idea of putting general comments, giving a overview. I do like the idea of an email going out, maybe individually to everybody. Here's the item of discussion. Here's the draft, or here's the white paper. Here's guiding principles. And if you have any questions, reach out directly to me, right? And then we have substance before they see it on the agenda packet and general manager comments, less likelihood of questions. Questions will most likely come in advance. I will respect the Brown Act and make sure that I don't share what others people's feelings are. And if there's any other suggestions that legal counsel wants to give me before I do that, then we'll get together after. We'll draft our item and we'll get it out to everybody else that's not here. And we'll get you guys a copy of the white paper and guiding principles as well. We'll just do them individually. It'll give notification. It'll give short description that this is what we're working on. We want to better protect our bargaining position. We'll come back to the board. Nothing will be signed. We will bargain. We'll bring something in place. But understanding white paper and intent of guiding principles will help guide us to a decision when we're ready. Yeah. You okay with that, Deborah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a nice way to achieve all of the goals.
Yes.
All right, so we don't need a motion on that. It was just a discussion. And now for the bylaws of our committee.
Sure. We included the bylaws in the packets, the last 2 pages. Ida and I were able to review the bylaws and didn't find anything of significance that needed to be addressed or changed. We would be happy to hear from the public, be happy to hear from the committee here. And we probably wouldn't bring bylaws in the February meeting. We would potentially get them to the first personnel meeting and share the same bylaws to see if there's any comments back, and then we'll bring it back to board to approve the existing and show that we revisited the bylaws, and we can show that it's been updated as of 2026 and that we're open to the bylaws that exist.
As needed.
Yep.
Okay, so no change, no rush. Any comment from the public? Anyone on Zoom? So we'll open and close public comment. Any input from board?
I don't have any.
None from me.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we don't need a motion on that. We'll move then to the financial audit from the general manager.
I just want to better communicate to the board that Giselle and team were able to get the financial audit finished. It'll be in the board packet for review in the next board meeting. We had no substantial findings in the audit. And we will look to have Nathan out here to present the audit findings to the board. And I think that's all I have. Anything you want to add, Giselle?
No, not all the entries that last year were of question. We booked all of those ahead of time, so this time was very clean.
And your name is Giselle?
Giselle, yeah.
Giselle. With 2 S's?
1 S, 2 L's.
1 S, 2 L's.
Giselle, you want to give a little bit of background of who you are and how long you've been here with ReGen?
Yeah. I'm Giselle Koktape. I'm assistant accounting manager. I've been here since 2019, so almost 6.5 years. I came from one of the big fours, Ernst & Young audit firm. And then after that, I worked at a tech company in San Jose, moved to Hollister, then worked at Martinelli's, then came here from there.
So you're wholly comfortable doing Garth's and Helen's job, including your annual own?
I'm trying to.
That's a good answer.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. The financial audit, I always find to be a wealth of information about the whole organization. You know, it talks about so many things. The purpose is dollars, but it seems like it goes well beyond that. So they're always great if you can have time to read them as board members. All right, any comments? We'll go to the public. Anybody online?
Sure. No.
Okay, we'll open and close public comment. Any board input?
No.
Okay, then we'll go on to number 7. Any future agenda items, folks? Want to suggest?
I have none.
I have none. All right, then we will adjourn, and our next meeting is March 4th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.